Hey everybody, I'm Jay.
And I'm Tracy, and welcome to the first week of Advent.
Yeah.
We're calling this series Restoring the Weary Soul, and we are hoping that it will give you and your small group a way to go through this season together.
Yep.
And we're really hoping that it'll give you a different way through the season together. We all know what the Christmas season can normally bring.
Right.
But we're endeavoring to make the choice to actually slow down instead of speed up. We're trying to reflect instead of keeping ourselves busy and allow God the opportunity to give us restoration of our soul through this time.
That's right. One way that you can do that could be helpful is to pick up a copy of Tracy's book. It just came out this week, went on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, which is really exciting for us.
Yeah.
But it's a daily devotional. That means there's a short chapter that you can read every day during this season. And it will really help kind of, orient you to considering the story and how it applies to your everyday life. So that's something that can be really helpful for you as you talk about that. That way we're soaking in the story as we're talking about these things in our small groups.
It's like we're going through the season together, which
Right.
is a really exciting thing for us. We want you to just know that we're so excited
Yeah.
that you want to be on this journey with us. And so we want to ask you right up front to send us pictures whenever you meet.
Yeah.
When we get those pictures, in the next couple days afterwards, it always brings us so much encouragement. It makes us feel like we're not alone. Look at
Right.
them. They're having fun.
Right.
So please send us a picture.
Yeah, we would love that. And it help all of you guys to know, too, that you're not alone.
You are not
There's
alone,
other people
yeah.
on this journey with us, which is really
Exactly.
cool. So, this idea as we go into Advent and we're celebrating the coming of Jesus. And what I think is beautiful about that is that we're celebrating everything that Jesus came to bring about.
Right.
When we kind of narrow the definition of gospel just down to Jesus died on the cross so that you could be forgiven and kind of you get your ticket into heaven, to say it very bluntly. But when it's reduced to that, we're missing out on so much more that the
Yeah.
gospel really is. There's so much good news about the fact that Jesus came to become one of us and to make his dwelling among us. There's so much good news about the way that Jesus showed us how to live and how to interact with people and the vision of the kingdom that he laid out for us in the Gospels. There's so much good news in the idea that we can become more and more like him all the time, and together with the spiritual community around us can be a reflection of the kind of kingdom that he really envisioned and talked about. And so as we're celebrating Jesus coming and we're looking forward to his return, we're getting to celebrate the fact that Jesus lived and he still lives.
Yeah.
It's not just that Jesus died for us. That's not all of the good news, but the fact that he lived and that he lives. And that's the good news that we really want to focus on.
Yes, and one of the ways that you can do that is by dwelling in the Word together. So
Yeah.
we're going to give you some ideas, some things that you can put into practice in your small group should you choose to.
Right.
Of course, you're free to do whatever you want. But one of the things we're going to do in our small group, and the way that we have been doing it, is we like to start every time that we have together dwelling in the Word. And what does that mean? Well, it means a lot more than I can explain right here. Actually, there's a video that we made explaining dwelling in the Word that I would love for you to go and check out. But the idea is that you start your time together by reading a passage. We're going to read the same passage every week. We begin, before we read the passage, we start with a minute of silence so that we can sort of position ourselves to hear from God. We quiet our souls and we position ourselves to be listeners. Then we read the passage very slowly. I would recommend very slowly. And you can just read through it once, maybe twice. But you listen for something that interrupts you, some little word or phrase that stands out to you that time. And instead of trying to take in every single word, this is not studying the Bible. It's not even reading the Bible. It's listening to the Word. Then you let God interrupt your thoughts with whatever words stuck out to you. And then you end the time by just sitting in silence for another 30 seconds or so. And then you share with each other what you heard.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found for our own small group is that it repositions all of us to remember that we've gathered together because we expect to hear from God.
Right.
We're not expecting a teacher to tell us what's important, you know,
Right.
which we love teachers. We're both teachers.
Right.
So we love it. But that's not really why we're together. We're together so that we can listen to God's will together.
Right.
And it puts us in the right posture right at the beginning of our time together. Right. So we wanted to recommend to you reading Isaiah 9, verses 6 and 7 each time that you gather at the beginning.
And actually, that passage we're going to use as our example passage in the video about how to dwell in the Word with your small group. So if you're interested, you can look at that. You may find a passage that actually resonates better with your group, and that's totally great and fine too. But we really like that one, and that's the one that we're going to be focusing on. So for today, we want to discuss a kind of a great metaphor that is used to talk about Jesus. That I think is really beautiful and will give us some great things to discuss. Let's go all the way back to Isaiah. Let's stay in Isaiah chapter 9. We're going to move back up to the beginning of the chapter, actually in verse 1. And so this is hundreds of years before Jesus, but we see this beautiful picture. It says, "Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned." So we get this picture of, some challenges, being humbled, the people in this land up in Galilee by, where the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, had landed, where their area was. He talks about that they had been humbled, but that the people there who were in darkness were going to see this great light. Isn't it great to see light when you're in darkness? Have you ever woken up in the middle of a hotel room and where you're not familiar with it and it's completely dark and you have no idea how to get to the bathroom? That light is so beautiful. It's wonderful to see, And there's such a relief that comes when you're feeling that darkness around you, but you have something that is drawing you forward, and it's like a sense of safety. Yes. And it's a beautiful moment, like it's pulling you that way.
Come to the light.
Come to the light.
That's a really old quote. Okay,
yeah.
I just aged myself.
But then if we move forward, we actually get to see that Matthew picks up on these verses and he inserts them into his gospel when he's starting to talk about Jesus starting his ministry. So let's look at that in Matthew chapter 4. It says, "When Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, he withdrew to Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he went and lived in Capernaum, which was by the lake in the area of Zebulun and Naphtali, to fulfill what was said through the prophet Isaiah." And then he repeats this again. "Land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned." And from that time on, Jesus began to preach, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near." And so we see this metaphor about, there's going to be a great light that is going to help people. And then Matthew says, you remember when Isaiah talked about that great light for the people who were walking in darkness? Guess what? It's happened. So Jesus came to Capernaum. He came to where Zebulun and Naphtali were. Jesus came there, and now he's starting his ministry. And he is that great light. And then it's cool because then we pick it up. We go to John's gospel in John chapter 1. And so much beautiful imagery in John chapter 1. But in verse 4, he says, in talking about Jesus as the Word, it says, "In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." And so what a beautiful picture that we're starting to see, this metaphor of the light, and that Jesus is that light that is helping all of us who find ourselves in darkness.
Exactly. And I was thinking about that. The word gloom stuck out to me when we read gloom. I mean, you know how that feels, right? And I was just thinking about how when John wrote this, think about the world he was in. So he had watched Jesus be killed. He had seen all of his friends,
his brother,
really, all of his brother, everybody, they had all been martyred. He's the only one that hadn't been. He's watching Nero just, obliterate the Christians. And, this incredible darkness. And he says, but the darkness cannot overcome it. He's talking about this light, and think about 2,000 years, we're still enamored by this light. This light cannot be put out.
Right.
And it just makes it all the more poignant to me that this is what we're talking about. We're talking about, look around us right now. I mean, it's gloomy. There are some gloomy days, some dark days. But there is that little light that can never be put out.
Right.
And I think that kind of is the question for us, is how do we go through the gloomy days?
Right.
Like, what do we do on the dark days? Because, sometimes it feels like we want a floodlight and all we're getting is a firefly. Yeah. And that's really what it feels like. Like we're in the middle of the forest and there's just like little fairy lights going on. But, something happens when you decide, it's okay. I don't need the floodlight. Like, I'm okay with the fairy lights. I'm okay with just enough light for the step that I'm on.
The next step, right.
That is, if I could describe anything, if I could have any metaphor to describe what it's been like to follow the light for us, it has been just enough light for the step that we are on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we want to give to you some practices, or at least one practice that you can do. Hopefully each week we can give you a practice. I don't know. I can't make any guarantees.
We'll see.
But we're hoping to give you a practice that you can use on your own and with your small group to sort of experience what it's like to capture that light for those gloomy times.
Right.
So we wanted to talk about triggers and glimmers. So do you guys know what the triggers are? Do you want to talk about triggers? Or
sure.
Should I?
And this is something that's kind of gotten really popular in our society, in our culture over the last few years. Is this term trigger? This idea that something occurs that then prompts an internal reaction. Or a memory, or something that happens to us inside. So we see something, it reminds us of something, either consciously or unconsciously, and it brings up then negative feelings, a feeling of anxiety, feelings of fear. Our amygdala starts going. It's even become so much that just the word itself, I am triggered. That now, it means like, oh, I'm really upset. Something has happened. Yeah. And I'm having like a disproportionate reaction to the situation at hand because it's reminding me of a lot of things from the past as well. And so I'm bringing the emotion from the past into my present reaction to this.
Exactly. And it is like you're being taken captive by your body.
Yeah.
Your body is doing what it was designed to do because something in the past happened and it's now reminding danger, danger, danger.
Right.
You are in trouble, whether you are or not, but it is safe. It's trying to keep you safe.
Yeah.
So we were designed to do that. It is your body taking over. They call it your reptilian brain is taking over, right? You're not using the front, the prefrontal cortex yet, okay? But that trigger, we're all familiar with that. It can take us captive.
Yeah.
We kind of are at its mercy, but we hopefully have tools, that you've heard from the mental health community, and all of them are very spiritual tools,
right.
That you can use to work yourself down through triggers. But there's another concept that has been bandied about now, and it's called glimmers. Okay, it's when you're going through your life in the same way, something happens, and all of a sudden you feel an intense amount of joy. Like you see God show up, or you see something happens, and you're like, whoa, I am just filled with a sense either of joy or ecstasy or even just pleasure,
right.
Being glad.
Yeah.
It can be small things, it can be big things, but it affects your body.
Right.
Now, some of us we're pretty out of touch with our bodies. A lot of us are.
Yeah.
We've kind of trained ourselves to go past We sort of stuff things down, or we just are out of touch, because we get to working and we're that kind of personality, whatever. But if we stop and really notice, we'll notice that it actually affects our body as well. There's a lightness that comes from it.
Yeah.
It's sometimes you can actually say, my heart has expanded. Like I feel like I could do anything. There's this sense of adrenaline. And what's happening is these good chemicals are going through your brain, right? All the serotonin, it's wonderful, it's lovely. These are the chemicals that we love going through our brain.
Right.
So they call these glimmers. And so we have been trying to do lately is, through the work of Jim Wilder and many others, they're trying to teach us how we can, just like a trigger takes over our body, how we can take advantage of these glimmers.
Right.
And how we can teach ourselves to return to those moments in times where it is gloomy.
Right.
In times where the darkness has come in and we're like, wow, I am down. I am really down again.
Right.
I'm at the end of my rope. So they teach us how to go back in and bring ourselves back to joy. Return to joy.
Right.
And so what you can do is you can write down, or it's kind of like, I look at it like it's collecting fireflies. Like I was talking about walking through the forest and these, this pops up here, pops up there. Picture yourself grabbing a jar and just going through and catching all those fireflies and putting the lid on so that now you have this jar of light, right? So as you're going through your daily life, when those times happen, stopping, noticing, and make a note on your phone or a little notebook, whatever works for you. Give it a title, write it down, and write down, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I feel? Making sure that you will be able to remember this.
Right.
You're writing down what happens to your body and all of that.
Right. Right.
You collect those.
Because it's not just, oh yeah, that was something good that happened, but it's almost you're trying to relive the experience. You're trying to remember, okay, what did the room look like? What did it smell like? What was the light like in the room? Because if you can relive those things, it does alter your brain chemistry,
right?
And it's bringing you back to that sense of like, okay, yes, this is good. So just like we have the negative triggers that then flood us with adrenaline and cortisol, then these positive glimmers can actually flood us with these chemicals that really, it's God's way of saying you are good and you're safe and it's okay.
Exactly.
And it's beautiful to be able to do that.
Exactly. It is what Paul said.
Right.
It is how to dwell on whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right. We know that is true.
Right.
Science even proves it out.
Yeah.
But we want to collect these, and so that when we're in these times, we actually have a practice where you stop yourself and you close your eyes and you return yourself to that memory. Your brain responds as if you're there again. Yeah. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of having a malleable brain.
Right.
So one of the ways that you want to say something?
I did.
Yeah,
because I just thought of this. Sometimes, gratitude is such a beautiful concept, and it's so important for us to have a state of gratitude. But I find that oftentimes, we've talked about it so much, and depending on your context, it can be used in such a way that, hey, you need to go write a gratitude list. And the implication is almost like, what's wrong with you that you're not grateful? You just need to get grateful. And so even the act of writing a gratitude list is shame-inducing, because we're like, why am I not grateful? Look at all these things I should be grateful for. I suck that I'm not grateful. And so
this isn't working.
So this, I love being able to take a moment and pause and like dwell in, oh no, this was a moment where I saw God show up. This was a moment where it was clear that God was working. That grounds me in these things that, and it helps me connect with those positive things, whatever is good and noble and true and trustworthy and praiseworthy and excellent, all those things. It helps me to connect with those things, and in a way that kind of sidesteps some of the baggage that I have in my head about that.
Exactly. Now, one cool way you can do this with your group, because of course this is a practice that you want to teach yourself to do on your own, and you really want to grow in your maturity and being able to return to joy through these big emotional times. But How do you do that in a group? Well, I've had some really great experiences with this lately, and we wanted to suggest this to you, that you take some time in your group today, just take 5 minutes of silence. Everybody take out your journal or your phone or whatever, and try to recall a time recently where you experienced some joyful thing that happened, even if it's as small as seeing, the sun come up and listening to the birds, to getting a new job, whatever. So I want you to go back and find one experience, not a ton, one experience. I want you to think about, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What do you hear? Really immerse yourself in it. Allow yourself to relive that experience for these 5 minutes together. Someone can set a timer. At the end of that 5 minutes, then want you to, if you want to, all of this is challenged by choice, okay? Right. So if you don't feel up to it today, by invitation only, you are invited to, and no one's going to be mad at you if you don't participate in this, okay? It's okay to say pass. Yeah. You can say pass. But if you would be willing to share your joyful experience while the group listens, and then the next person, they don't just share their experience. They actually mirror back to you what they heard you saying. So if we were in a circle of, 6 or 8 people, I would share my experience. And then before Jay shared, he would tell me what he heard from me. I hear you saying this. What I heard, what I remember is this. And, each one of these, you explain it in 2 minutes. These aren't 20-minute stories. Okay, right. So let me just say that. It's a 2-minute story. Yeah. He mirrors back to me what I said. And then he shares his story. Right. And then somebody else mirrors back to him what he said, and they tell their story. There's a couple ways you could do that. You could just go around the circle. You could also, just draw numbers at the beginning when everybody gets there, and you could just go in a random order, which never ends up being random. It's always interesting how God does that. But just draw numbers at the beginning and share. And what happens with this time is that each person is seen, heard, and known. And it really changes how we interact with each other and how we feel. Yeah. These are the things that we need to feel safe. Yeah. And we're trying to create safety within our groups so that we can open ourselves up to hearing the Spirit.
Right. And if you do have a big group, if you've got like 15 people, then you don't want to do that with everybody. But, after those 5 minutes, just kind of break up into smaller groups of, 4 to 6, whatever. Whatever you feel like is comfortable, so that everybody has a chance to be able to be seen and heard and known. And it's a beautiful thing. And so all of this is to bring us back to this awareness that the light has come into the world, and the darkness has not overcome it and will not ever overcome it. Yeah. And this is how, in this first week of Advent, we're going to focus our mind on the beautiful coming of Jesus. And together in community be able to experience that. Yeah. So if you've stayed this long, thanks for listening. Yeah. And we're really excited that you're here. And check out the other video whenever you want about dwelling in the Word with your small group. And send this to a friend that might be encouraged. And we look forward to seeing you next week.